In many traditional cultures, women aren't allowed to own or inherit property. Losing a husband through death or divorce can be a guarantee of poverty. But two women in Malawi have defied that fate. Here's their story. Nolia Jere, a rural farmer in northern Malawi, lost everything she had. It wasn't war, disease, or natural disaster that took it away. It was tribal law. After her husband died, Nolia's brother-in-law demanded she marry him. She refused and was forced from her home, losing her land and even her children to her in-laws.
He was mistreating me. He snatched away my clothes and traded them for beer. He made life very difficult for me.
It's a story all too familiar to Zelani Konje, a journalist from a middle-class family. When her husband divorced her, she also lost her home.
He wanted us to divorce. And specifically, it was because he says I couldn't give him a child.
Both women felt powerless in a society where many believe all property belongs to men. But even with the odds stacked heavily against them, Nolia and Zelani would challenge this centuries-old injustice.
Every time the man has got total authority over the woman.
Short Mkochi is an elder from Nolia's ancestral village.
She can be beaten. She can be teased in any way. She has got no say.
Malawi in southern Africa is largely an agricultural society. Nearly two-thirds of its 13 million people live in rural areas on land mostly administered by tribal chiefs, all men. By tradition, the man is the head of the household and owns everything: the land, the house, even his wives and children. When he dies, his property belongs to the next man in the family.
For instance, if the brother dies, can the woman be inherited? Whether she likes it or not, people will inherit her.
After refusing to marry her brother-in-law, Nolia returned to her parents' home, only to discover she had no status in her village, nowhere to build a home or cultivate crops. Nolia's younger brother allowed her to stay with him, but she soon became a servant to his family, carrying out domestic chores and working his fields from morning to night. She lived in poverty.
Imagine that sometimes I had to steal the maize behind his back so that I could get the money to buy the things I needed.
But Nolia secretly dreamt of having her own piece of land where she could farm and control her own life.
I thought our culture would not allow it. I was afraid that other people would get upset and reject me, so I just kept quiet.
Like Nolia, Zelani's life fell apart when her marriage ended.
It was very tough for me. I remember there was a time I literally had no money.
Something that she was not accustomed to. Born to well-educated parents who had studied in the United States, Zelani always was well provided for. One of her happiest days, she says, was her wedding.
In 1999, I got married to a guy who I was so in love with.
Zelani worked as a video editor for Malawi TV while pursuing a college degree in journalism. With money she borrowed from her mother, she assisted her husband, a civil engineer, to launch his own business. Still, Zelani was a very traditional woman.
I made sure that there's food on the table. I made sure that his clothes are ironed. I did every chore you can think of that a wife should do.
The young couple settled down and built their dream house. But the dream ended in divorce. Zelani was devastated.
And I left the home. I took nothing. He said that I should find a house.
After trying to claim her share of their house, she was reminded of her place in society.
He said, "You are a thief, you're trying to steal my property." His lawyer told me, "You know what, do you have any papers that prove that you contributed something to the property?" I said, "I don't. We were married. I didn't see divorce coming."
The traditions that trap Zelani and Nolia are at odds with Malawi's legal code and international human rights standards.
Those that are of that opinion say aye.
In 1987, Malawi ratified the United Nations Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, recognizing that women have equal rights to own land and property. 8 years later, the country adopted a constitution guaranteeing women equal rights with men. But it was only recently that Zelani discovered this when she landed a job with the non-profit group Action Aid International Malawi, which informs villagers about their land rights.
I realized that as a woman, I have rights. I went into the field, I saw how women were fighting. We're fighting for property, we're fighting for a good life, for everything.
And Zelani saw what a tough challenge rural women face when she visited Nolia's village.
So, Mr. Nkochi, you're totally against women's land rights. To you, that is something that should not happen.
That is difficult because it will mean my children, my sons will have no land.
Do you understand actually the issue of women's rights?
Yes, I do. There's gender. There's gender.
So gender, it means it's equality.
Yes.
In terms of men and women.
Yes.
Being land ownership or property ownership.
No. It's gender.
To help overcome these attitudes, Action Aid, partly funded by the Dutch government, is reaching out to women, teaching them how to read and write, count and calculate, and to become better farmers. But the challenge remains how to convince men to share land with their wives.
There are so many examples where you'd find that the man was initially refusing.
Wangani Mugawa is from Action Aid Malawi. He works to convince men that giving women equal rights may increase crop yields.
And then they say, okay, we'll give it a try. They end up producing more crop. And that has made them to start changing, to say they have seen that there are positive things that are happening.
And attitudes seem to be changing even among influential tribal leaders like Umkoshi Umzukuzuku.
A woman is also a person like a man. If I die, my wife should have power on that land. My brother cannot disturb her on that land. That is her own land with my children.
And now Nolia has found the courage to demand that her brother, the village chief, give her a piece of land. And he did, 4 acres, making her the first woman in her village to own her own plot. Nolia now earns a living selling her crops.
I have one big plan. I should now start building my own house, because you cannot say that someone controls her own life when she doesn't have a house of her own.
Inspired by Nolia's success, Zelani decided to do something about her own problem.
I say to myself, something must be done. There should be fair distribution of property upon divorce.
Zelani consulted a lawyer, Sodi White, who says it's a clear example of discrimination.
The presumption should be when you enter into a marriage, all property should form half of, each one has an entitlement to half of the property.
White filed a case in 2010 claiming that what happened to Zelani and women like her violates Malawi's constitution.
Because this is a precedent-setting case. We want the court to make a decision once and for all on all property rights issues, and they'll affect every woman in Malawi.
After the decision, that is the 6th.
As Zelani awaits the results of the court hearing, Nolia continues to march for women's rights to land and property.
Now I'm very happy. I'm able to smile. My life has changed. I'd like to see what has happened to me happen to other women as well.
Publicity is the key. I want someone else to hear. Those who have never heard about women's land rights issues should hear. Imagine women, thousands of women demanding, being able to access information, being able to demand and claim what belongs to them. That is what I see in the near future.